I was hiding around the corner when I heard them laughing. Two staff members. They thought no one was listening.
Once they've paid the deposit and been here 3 months, we don't need to try as hard.
Where else are they going to go?
We've been deceived, trapped, exploited. I'm Patricia Morrison, and at 75 years old, I discovered that the luxury senior living facility I'd trusted with my life was nothing but a beautiful lie. What happened next changed everything. Hello, everyone. Today, I want to share my story with you. A story that changed everything about how I view the final chapters of life. It was my 75th birthday morning. I woke up alone, as I had every morning for the past 2 years. I sat in front of my mirror, looking at my reflection. The wrinkles around my eyes told stories of laughter and tears. The silver hair that had completely replaced the awe I once knew reminded me that time waits for no one. A deep sigh escaped my lips as I gazed at the family photos on my bedroom wall. When I was young, we didn't have much money, but we had hope. My husband James and I worked so hard raising our 3 children. James worked double shifts at the factory, and I took in sewing to make extra money. Michael, our oldest, became a successful businessman. David, our middle child, became an accountant. And Susan, our youngest, became a school teacher. Those were tough years, but they were happy ones. Every milestone filled our hearts with joy. The years flew by. Our children grew up, started their own families, and gave us 7 beautiful grandchildren. Holiday gatherings were wonderful, loud, chaotic, and full of love. I thought those days would last forever. But life has a way of changing course. 2 years ago, James collapsed in our garden while planting tomatoes. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. 50 years of marriage ended in an instant. The funeral was a blur. The weeks after were worse. The house became unbearably quiet. At first, the kids were wonderful. Michael called every day. Susan brought groceries and cleaned. David handled the paperwork. But gradually, as they got busier with their own lives, the visits became less frequent. The daily calls turned into weekly check-ins. I understood. They had their own families, careers, responsibilities. But understanding didn't make the loneliness easier. My house became a mausoleum of memories. Some days, the only person I'd speak to was the checkout clerk at the grocery store. On my 75th birthday morning, I sat alone with my coffee, expecting nothing special. Then the doorbell rang. To my surprise, it was Michael with a birthday cake in an envelope. "Mom, happy birthday," he said, embracing me. "I took the morning off to spend it with you." I burst into tears, overwhelmed. We sat at the kitchen table, and he cut us each a piece of cake. Then Michael pulled out glossy brochures for Sunset Meadows Senior Living Community. My heart sank. I knew what was coming. "Mom, I've been worried about you." Living alone in this big house, Michael began gently. "This place is incredible. State-of-the-art facilities, activities every day, people your age to socialize with. You'd have your own apartment, but you wouldn't be alone anymore." He spread the brochures across the table. The photos were impressive, elegant dining rooms, fitness centers, art studios, a library. Seniors laughing together, taking yoga classes, painting. "It's not a nursing home, Mom," he quickly added. "This is luxury senior living. Think of it like a resort. No more worrying about yard work, home repairs, or being alone. Everything's taken care of." "Are you trying to send me away?" I asked quietly. "No, Mom. I'm trying to give you a better life. We want you to be happy, safe, with people around you. This house is full of loneliness, isn't it?" He was right. "How often would you visit?" I asked. "All the time. It's only 20 minutes from my house, 15 from Susan's." "We'll see you more often than we do now." "Just come look at it," Michael urged. "If you don't like it, no pressure." I nodded. "Okay, I'll look at it." The next day, We drove to Sunset Meadows. The entrance looked like a five-star resort. Inside, the lobby took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers, elegant furniture. Classical music played softly. "Good morning. Welcome to Sunset Meadows." A woman named Rachel greeted us warmly. "I'm the community director. Let me show you around." For 2 hours, Rachel showed us everything. The private apartments were spacious and beautiful, with full bathrooms, kitchenettes, and lovely views. The library housed thousands of books with cozy reading nooks. The art studio had easels, paints, and pottery wheels. The fitness center was equipped with machines modified for seniors. "We have yoga every morning," Rachel explained. "Water aerobics 3 times a week in our heated pool. Our chef prepares 3 meals daily with fresh ingredients. There's always multiple options." We walked through beautiful gardens, saw the movie theater, the cafe, the beauty salon. But what really got to me were the residents themselves. They seemed genuinely happy, chatting, laughing, working on puzzles together. One woman approached us in the garden. "Are you thinking about joining us? I'm Dorothy Williams. I moved in 2 months ago, and honestly, I wish I'd done it sooner." "Really?" I asked, surprised. "Oh, absolutely. I was living alone, barely seeing anyone. Here, I've made wonderful friends. There's always something to do. Last week we went to the symphony. Tomorrow there's a cooking demonstration." Dorothy's genuine happiness was infectious. Back in Rachel's office, she showed us the activities calendar. Something was happening every hour: morning exercises, art classes, book clubs, guest speakers, movie nights, shopping trips, cooking classes. The variety was astonishing. "And the medical care?" I asked. "We have registered nurses on staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week," Rachel said seriously. "Regular wellness checks, medication management, and we're 5 minutes from Regional Medical Center for emergencies." By the end of the tour, I felt overwhelmed, but in a good way. "What do you think, Mom?" Michael asked as we drove home. "It's not what I expected," I admitted. "It's actually quite nice." 3 days later, I called Michael. "Okay, let's do it." The paperwork was processed, the deposit paid, and a move-in date was set for 3 weeks later. As I looked around my house where James and I had raised our children, where we'd planned to grow old together, I felt sadness, fear, and strange excitement. Moving day arrived on a bright Saturday morning. All my children and grandchildren came to help. It was emotional, filled with tears and laughter. As we sorted through 50 years of memories. "Mom, do you really need all these photo albums?" David asked. "Absolutely. Those are my life." The hardest part was saying goodbye to the house itself. The kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals. The living room where the kids opened Christmas presents. The bedroom where James and I had shared our lives. "Ready, Mom?" Michael asked gently. "As ready as I'll ever be." We arrived at Sunset Meadows around 2 o'clock. My apartment was on the 3rd floor with a lovely view of the gardens. My family helped me unpack. Michael hung pictures. Susan organized my kitchenette. David set up my TV. The grandchildren placed my snow globes on the bookshelf. By evening, the apartment looked quite nice. James's chair sat by the window. Our wedding photo was on the nightstand. Emma's crayon drawings covered the refrigerator. "Grandma, I love your new place," Emma exclaimed. "Can we visit all the time?" "I'm counting on it," I told her. As my family prepared to leave, I felt panic. "Mom, you're going to be fine," Susan said. "Better than fine." "We'll call tomorrow," David promised. "I'll come by Monday after work," Michael added. After they left, I stood alone feeling completely disoriented. The sounds were different: hallway conversations, the elevator. The smells were different: cleaning products instead of lavender. Even the light was different. I went to bed early, exhausted. As I lay in my new bed, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. But the next morning changed everything. I woke to sunlight and birds singing. A soft knock came at my door. "Mrs. Morrison? Breakfast is being served." I made my way to the dining room. The breakfast buffet offered eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, yogurt, oatmeal, and pastries. Real china plates and cloth napkins. "Patricia. Over here." Dorothy waved from a table by the window. "Come join us." She introduced me to George Henderson, Betty Sullivan, and Harold Mitchell. They were warm and welcoming, filling me in on everything: which staff members were helpful, which activities were worth attending, where the best spot in the garden was. "The Tuesday yoga class is wonderful," Dorothy said. "The instructor is so patient." Their warmth made me feel instantly at ease. After breakfast, I joined Dorothy for yoga. The instructor, Sarah, was patient and encouraging. "Beautiful, Patricia," she said. "You're a natural." By the end of the hour, I felt energized. My body felt looser, more alive than it had in months. The rest of that first day passed pleasantly. Lunch was delicious. I joined a gardening session in the afternoon. Dinner was roasted salmon. After dinner, residents gathered in the library to chat. We talked about books, families, careers. There was comfort in being with people who understood. That night, as I got ready for bed, I felt genuinely tired in a good way. Maybe this was going to be okay after all. Little did I know then just how wrong that feeling would turn out to be. The first few weeks at Sunset Meadows felt like waking up to a new life. Every morning started with yoga at 8 o'clock, and I looked forward to it with an enthusiasm that surprised me. Sarah, our instructor, had a gift for making even the most inflexible among us feel capable and strong. "Remember, ladies and gentlemen, yoga isn't about perfection," she'd say with her warm smile. "It's about showing up for yourself, honoring where your body is today, and breathing through the challenge." After yoga, breakfast with my new friends became the highlight of my mornings. Dorothy, George, Betty, Harold, and I claimed the table by the window as ours, and the staff started automatically setting it for 5 every morning. We talked about everything: our families, our past careers, current events, books we were reading. George had the most amazing stories from his 30 years as a postal worker. He'd seen everything from marriage proposals delivered by mail to packages containing live chickens. "I once had to deliver a letter that was addressed to the nice lady with the red roses on Maple Street," he told us one morning, his eyes twinkling. "Took me 3 days, but I found her." Betty, our resident intellectual, always had something thought-provoking to say about whatever we were discussing. She'd been a librarian for 42 years and had read more books than I could imagine. "You know what I love about being here?" she said one day. "I'm finally around people who still read actual books. My grandchildren think I'm ancient because I don't use an e-reader." Harold, with his dry humor, kept us laughing. "My doctor told me I should take up a hobby to keep my mind sharp," he deadpanned. "So I took up worrying. I'm very good at it now." And Dorothy became my closest friend. We were the same age, both widows, both struggling with the transition from independent living to this new chapter. We understood each other without needing many words. The activities at Sunset Meadows were genuinely engaging. On Tuesdays, I attended watercolor painting classes. I'd never considered myself artistic, but our instructor, a gentle woman named Margaret, made everyone feel like they could create something beautiful. "Art isn't about creating a masterpiece," Margaret would say. "It's about expressing yourself, about the joy of putting color on paper and seeing what emerges." I painted landscapes, flowers, abstract pieces. To my surprise, I wasn't half bad. My apartment walls slowly filled with my artwork, and every time I looked at them, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Thursday afternoons were for book club. We'd just finished The Nightingale and were starting Where the Crawdads Sing. The discussions were lively and intelligent. These weren't superficial conversations. We dove deep into themes, characters, moral questions. What would you have done in Vian's situation? Betty asked during our discussion of The Nightingale. Would you have risked everything to save strangers? The question sparked a 2-hour conversation about courage, morality, and the choices we make when faced with impossible situations. I left that discussion feeling mentally stimulated in a way I hadn't felt in years. Wednesdays, I joined the gardening club. There were raised beds where we could grow vegetables and flowers. I planted tomatoes, James's favorite, and every time I tended them, I felt close to him somehow. The physical work felt good, therapeutic. Getting my hands in the soil, feeling the sun on my face, watching things grow, it was healing. Friday nights were movie nights in the theater. They showed a mix of classic films and recent releases. We'd gather with popcorn and candy, just like going to a real cinema. Last week they showed Casablanca, and I cried at the ending just like I had the first time I saw it with James 50 years ago. My children called regularly those first few weeks. Michael every Monday, Susan every Wednesday, David every Friday. They'd ask how I was settling in, what activities I'd tried, whether I'd made friends. "Mom, you sound so happy," Susan said during one of our calls. "Your voice is different. Lighter." She was right. I did feel lighter. The crushing loneliness that had defined my life for 2 years was gone. I woke up every morning with something to look forward to. I went to bed every night having had meaningful conversations with people who cared. Michael visited the second Sunday after I moved in and took me out to lunch at my favorite Italian restaurant. "So, Mom, tell me honestly, are you glad you made the move?" he asked as we shared a plate of tiramisu. "You know what?" I said, surprising myself. "I really am. I was so resistant at first, but you were right. This is exactly what I needed." The relief on his face was palpable. "I'm so glad, Mom. We all felt terrible about pushing you, but we were so worried about you alone in that house." "I know, honey. And you were right to push. Sometimes we need our children to help us see what we can't see ourselves." Susan visited the following week with Emma, my granddaughter. Emma was fascinated by everything: the gardens, the art studio, the movie theater. "Grandma, this place is so cool," she exclaimed. "It's like a fancy hotel." We took Emma to the art studio, and Margaret let her paint alongside the residents. Emma created a vibrant abstract piece that she was incredibly proud of. Watching her paint, surrounded by my new friends who were charmed by her enthusiasm, I felt a deep contentment. This was what I'd wanted: to be part of a community while still being connected to my family. The 3-month mark came and went. I'd fully adapted to life at Sunset Meadows. My apartment truly felt like home now. I knew everyone's names and stories. I had my routines, my friend group, my favorite spots in the building. One evening, Dorothy and I sat in the garden watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It had become our ritual: evening walks followed by sitting on our bench to watch the day end. "Are you happy here, Patricia?" Dorothy asked me. I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I finally said. "I really am." It took time to adjust, but I made the right choice. "What about you?" "Me too," Dorothy agreed. "Though I do wish my daughter visited more often. She's so busy with her job and the kids." I nodded, understanding. The truth was, my children's visits had already started to become less frequent. The initial excitement had worn off. Susan now came every other week instead of weekly. David's Friday calls sometimes got pushed to Saturday or forgotten entirely. Michael still took me to lunch most Sundays, but he'd canceled twice due to work. But I had my community here, I told myself. I wasn't alone. That's what mattered. You know what I realized the other day? I said to Dorothy. I haven't felt lonely once since moving here. Not once. And before, loneliness was like this constant weight on my chest. I know exactly what you mean, Dorothy said softly. After my husband died, the silence in my house was deafening. Here, there's always life. Always something happening. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken and the first stars appear. The air was warm, carrying the scent of roses from the nearby beds. Someone was playing piano in the music room. I could hear Chopin drifting through an open window. This is nice, I said simply. Yes, Dorothy agreed. It really is. If only I'd known then that this peaceful contentment was temporary. That the warm welcome and excellent service were just the opening act of a very different show. The cracks were already forming, barely visible yet, but they were there. Looking back now, I can see the small signs I missed. The yoga instructor who called in sick one Tuesday with no substitute provided just a cancelled class. The slight decline in the lunch salad one day, iceberg lettuce instead of the usual spring mix. The maintenance request I put in for a dripping faucet that took 3 days instead of the usual same-day service. Small things, easily dismissed as flukes or bad days. But they were the beginning of something bigger. Around the 4-month mark, those small cracks started to widen. The decline was subtle enough that I almost didn't notice at first. But it was there, and it was accelerating. The meals that had once been delicious and varied started to become repetitive. Tuesday's chicken reappeared on Thursday, just with different sauce. The fresh vegetables we'd enjoyed gave way to frozen ones. The salad bar that used to have a dozen options shrank to 5 or 6. Does this taste different to you? Dorothy whispered during lunch one day, poking at her chicken. It's dry, I agreed. And isn't this the 4th time this week we've had chicken? 5th, actually, George said grimly. I've been counting. When Betty mentioned it to the dining staff, she was met with a dismissive response. We're doing our best with our budget constraints. We can't please everyone all the time. The yoga class was cancelled 2 more times in the next month, always last minute. Always with no substitute instructor. The watercolor class I loved so much was suddenly reduced from twice weekly to once weekly due to budget adjustments. The staff's demeanor changed too. The warm smiles and eager helpfulness of those first months gave way to perfunctory interactions. The receptionist who used to greet everyone by name now barely looked up from her computer. The dining staff who chatted pleasantly while serving meals now dropped plates and hurried away. Have you noticed the staff seems different lately? Dorothy asked me one afternoon as we walked through the garden, which itself was looking less manicured than before. I have, I admitted. Yesterday I asked one of the aides for help adjusting my shower chair, and she sighed like I was asking her to move mountains. Same thing happened to me, Dorothy said. I needed help with my blood pressure cuff, and the nurse made me feel like I was bothering her. We both fell silent, not wanting to admit what we were starting to feel, that something fundamental was changing at Sunset Meadows, and not for the better. But the real wake-up call was still to come. The incident that would shatter any remaining illusions about the care we were receiving. That moment was just around the corner, and it would change everything. If you're finding this story compelling, please hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Your support helps us share more important stories like this one. Now, let's continue with what happened next. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in late October, about 5 months after I'd moved to Sunset Meadows. I was reading in bed around 11 o'clock when I heard a commotion in the hallway, raised voices, hurried footsteps, someone crying out in distress. I opened my door to find several residents in their bathrobes gathered outside George's apartment. George was sitting on the floor against the wall, clutching his chest, his face pale and covered in sweat. His breathing was labored, and his eyes were wide with fear. What happened? I asked, my heart racing. He's having chest pains, Harold said, his voice tight with worry. We pushed the emergency call button 15 minutes ago. No one's come yet. 15 minutes? That couldn't be right. We've been promised 24-hour nursing care, immediate response to emergencies. Dorothy was already on her cell phone. Yes, I need an ambulance at Sunset Meadows Senior Living, 2247 Oak Ridge Drive. We have a 78-year-old man with severe chest pain and difficulty breathing. The facility's nurse hasn't responded to our calls. Betty was kneeling next to George, holding his hand and speaking to him in soothing tones. Help is coming, George. Just breathe slowly. You're going to be okay. Finally the night nurse appeared, looking flustered and defensive. She was young, maybe mid-20s, and clearly overwhelmed. I'm sorry, I was dealing with another resident, she said, not quite making eye contact. Let me check his vitals. Another resident? I said, my voice sharper than I intended. George has been sitting here in agony for 15 minutes. He could be having a heart attack. I can only be in one place at a time, she snapped back. We're short-staffed tonight. The paramedics arrived minutes later, thank God for Dorothy's quick thinking, and took George to Regional Medical Center. We later learned it was severe acid reflux, not a heart attack. But that night we had no way of knowing. George could have died in that hallway while waiting for help that was supposedly guaranteed. After the ambulance left, those of us who'd witnessed the incident stood in the hallway, too shaken and angry to go back to our rooms. This is unacceptable, Betty said, her voice trembling. We were promised 24-hour medical care. What if it had been a real heart attack? We're paying $5,000 a month for this level of care, Harold added bitterly. Or should I say, this level of neglect? Dorothy and I exchanged a long look. We were both thinking the same thing. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a much larger problem. The next morning, 6 of us marched to Director Rachel's office to file a formal complaint. The warm, welcoming woman who'd given me my tour was gone, replaced by someone cold and corporate. We understand your concerns, Rachel said in a practiced, professional tone. However, we're operating within all industry standards and state requirements. Our nurse-to-resident ratio meets legal minimums. Legal minimums? I repeated incredulously. You promised us 24-hour immediate care. You told me when I toured that a nurse would always be available. And we do have a nurse on duty 24 hours, Rachel replied smoothly. But that doesn't mean instantaneous one-on-one care at all times. That would be unrealistic given our operational costs. So you lied during the sales pitch, Dorothy said bluntly. Rachel's expression hardened. I wouldn't characterize it that way. Perhaps expectations need to be adjusted. This is an independent living facility, not a hospital. We left her office feeling betrayed and powerless. The beautiful promises that had convinced us to uproot our lives and move here were revealed as nothing more than marketing tactics. Over the following weeks, the decline accelerated. More activities were cancelled. The quality of housekeeping dropped. My apartment that used to be cleaned thoroughly twice a week now got a cursory vacuuming once a week. Equipment in the gym broke and went unrepaired for weeks. The beautiful gardens became overgrown and weedy. The food got worse. Much worse. Meals that had once been fresh and varied became bland and repetitive. We started finding obvious cost-cutting measures: powdered eggs instead of fresh, margarine instead of butter, mystery meat that might have been chicken or might have been something else entirely. What is this supposed to be? Harold asked one dinner, poking at a gray substance on his plate. The menu says herb-crusted fish, Betty read. But I think the herbs forgot to show up. The gallows humor helped, but underneath, We were all growing increasingly unhappy and frustrated. The atmosphere among the residents changed. The warm camaraderie of those first months gave way to complaints and resentment. People stopped attending activities that were either cancelled or so poorly run they weren't worth the effort. The worst part, though, was how the staff treated us. The mask had completely dropped. The friendly, attentive service we'd experienced initially was replaced by barely concealed irritation at having to deal with us at all. One afternoon, I needed help carrying some boxes from my storage unit to my apartment. I went to the front desk to request assistance, something that used to be handled cheerfully and immediately. The receptionist didn't even look up from her phone. "We don't have anyone available right now. When will someone be available?" I asked. She shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe later." "Can you at least check?" I pressed. "These boxes have my winter clothes, and it's getting cold." With an exaggerated sigh, she picked up the phone and had a brief conversation. "Someone will get to it when they can," she said dismissively, already looking back at her phone. I waited 4 hours. 4 hours for a task that should have taken 10 minutes and that I'd been promised would be handled promptly. Dorothy had similar experiences. "I asked for my light bulb to be changed 3 times, she told me one evening. 3 times. It's been 2 weeks. I finally asked Harold to do it because I was tired of sitting in a dark bathroom. Betty's medication was delivered 4 hours late one day. Medication she needed to take at specific times for her heart condition. When she complained, the nurse shrugged and said, "We're doing the best we can with limited staff." Harold put in a maintenance request for a leak under his sink. It went ignored for 6 weeks until water damage started showing through his floor. We felt trapped, deceived, and increasingly frightened. We'd signed year-long contracts and paid significant deposits. We'd given up our homes to come here. And now we were discovering that the excellent care and service had been nothing more than a temporary show to lock us in. The final straw, at least for me, came one cold December evening. My granddaughter Emma was turning 7, and she was having a birthday party. She'd been talking about it for weeks, so excited to show me her unicorn-themed decorations and cake. "You'll be there, right, Grandma?" she'd asked during her last visit, her eyes shining. "It starts at 6:30. "Of course, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss it for the world," I'd promised. But when I went to the administration office to arrange my evening out, I was told it wasn't possible. "Our policy is that residents must return by 6 p.m., the administrator said flatly. "No exceptions." "But this is my granddaughter's 7th birthday," I protested. "My son will drive me there and back. I'll be perfectly safe." "Policy is policy, Mrs. Morrison. We can't make exceptions." "Are you telling me I'm not allowed to attend my own granddaughter's birthday party?" "You're free to attend events that end by 6 p.m., she replied without emotion. "Perhaps your family could arrange an earlier celebration specifically for you." I stood there, stunned and furious. "I'm 75 years old. I'm paying $5,000 a month to live here. And you're telling me I need permission to visit my family?" "Those are the rules for residents' safety," she said, already turning away to indicate the conversation was over. I went back to my apartment and cried. I called Susan to tell her I couldn't come. "Mom, that's ridiculous," she said, anger clear in her voice. "You're not a prisoner." But that's exactly how I felt. Like a prisoner in a gilded cage. That night, I sat alone in my apartment while Emma's party happened without me. I imagined her blowing out the candles on her unicorn cake, opening presents, laughing with her friends. And I wasn't there because some arbitrary rule said I had to be safe in my apartment by 6 p.m. like a child with a bedtime. I thought about James and what he would say if he could see me now. He'd be furious. He'd tell me to pack my bags and leave immediately. James never tolerated being treated with disrespect, and he wouldn't want me to tolerate it either. Around 8 o'clock, There was a knock on my door. It was Dorothy. She took one look at my tear-stained face and came inside without a word, wrapping me in a hug. "I heard," she said softly, "about Emma's party." "Patricia, this is wrong. All of this is wrong." I pulled back and looked at my friend. "I can't do this anymore, Dorothy. I can't stay here." "Neither can I," she said firmly. "I'm done. We need to leave." "But how? The contracts, the money." "I don't care," Dorothy interrupted. "We're still alive, Patricia. We still have dignity. We deserve better than this. And I'll be damned if I'm going to spend whatever years I have left being treated like I don't matter." Her words ignited something in me, a spark of the person I used to be before grief and loneliness had worn me down. She was right. I wasn't dead yet. I still had a voice, still had choices, still had the right to be treated with respect. "You're right," I said, my voice growing stronger. "You're absolutely right. So what do we do?" Dorothy smiled, a fierce, determined smile I'd never seen on her face before. "We fight back. We document everything. We gather evidence. We get our money back and we get out of here." "They'll never let us out of our contracts," I said doubtfully. "Then we make them want to let us out," Dorothy replied. "We become more trouble than we're worth. We demand accountability. We threaten to go to the media, to the state ombudsman, to every regulatory agency that oversees these places." For the first time in months, I felt hope stirring my chest. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it. Let's get out of here." We stayed up until midnight that night, making plans. Our great escape from Sunset Meadows was about to begin. The next morning, Dorothy and I started our campaign in earnest. We weren't going down without a fight. First, we began documenting everything, every service failure, every broken promise, every instance of neglect or disrespect. I started carrying a small notebook everywhere, jotting down details with dates and times. Dorothy did the same. October 15th, 2:30 p.m. requested help with shower chair adjustment. Staff member sighed audibly and said, "I'm busy," then walked away without helping. I wrote. October 16th, yoga class cancelled again with no notice. "That's the fourth cancellation this month," Dorothy added to her notes. We took photographs. The weeds in the garden beds that used to be immaculate. The broken treadmill in the gym that had been awaiting repair for 6 weeks. The mystery meat served at dinner that bore no resemblance to what was printed on the menu. We also started talking to other residents, really listening to their complaints and concerns. We discovered we weren't alone in our dissatisfaction, not by a long shot. George's story about his chest pains and the delayed response was just the beginning. Betty told us her blood pressure medication had been delivered late multiple times, and once the pharmacy order had been completely forgotten until she went down to the nursing station herself to ask for it. "They told me I should have reminded them," Betty said, her voice shaking with indignation, as if monitoring my medication wasn't literally their job. Harold shared that his request for grab bars to be installed in his shower, a reasonable safety accommodation, had been in review for 3 months with no action taken. "But they were quick enough to cash my monthly check," he said bitterly. One woman named Margaret told us she'd fallen in her apartment and pushed her emergency call button. 25 minutes passed before anyone responded. 25 minutes I laid on the floor, terrified I'd broken my hip, she said, tears in her eyes. When the aide finally came, she seemed annoyed that I'd bothered her. Another resident, Frank, said his daughter had come to visit and been told she couldn't see him because it wasn't during designated visiting hours, a policy that had never been mentioned before and wasn't in any of the paperwork. With each story, Dorothy and I grew more determined. This wasn't just about us anymore. This was about every vulnerable senior being exploited by a facility that had promised care and delivered neglect. But the real turning point came when Dorothy overheard something she wasn't supposed to hear. She was returning to her apartment after lunch when she noticed two staff members standing around the corner in a hallway alcove, talking. They didn't realize anyone was nearby. "I don't know why everyone's complaining so much about the service changes," one of them said. "It's not like they're going anywhere." The other laughed. "Exactly," Rachel said. "Once they've been here 3 months and paid the full deposit, we don't need to try as hard. Where else are they going to go? Most of them don't even have homes to go back to. Plus, if they complain too much, we just tell them they're confused or difficult. Who's going to believe a bunch of old people over us?" They both laughed, and Dorothy stood frozen around the corner, her hand over her mouth to keep from crying out in fury. When she told me what she'd heard, I felt physically sick. We weren't people to them. We were just revenue streams. Once they had our money and our signatures on contracts, they could treat us however they wanted because they assumed we had no recourse. "They think we're powerless," I said, my voice cold with anger. "Then let's show them." "They're wrong," Dorothy replied. We called a meeting with all the residents who'd shared complaints with us. 12 people showed up in the library that evening, everyone with their own stories of declining service and broken promises. "Here's what I propose," I said, standing at the front of the group. "We compile all our evidence, every photo, every documented incident, every broken promise. We go to Rachel together and demand to be released from our contracts without financial penalty." "And if she refuses?" Harold asked. "Then we go to the state ombudsman for long-term care facilities," Betty said. She'd been doing research. "We file formal complaints. We contact the local news stations. I bet they'd love a story about a luxury senior living facility exploiting vulnerable elderly residents. We also post reviews everywhere," Dorothy added. "Online, social media, wherever potential residents might look. We tell the truth about what this place really is." "Won't we get in trouble?" Margaret asked nervously. "What if they sue us?" "For what? Telling the truth?" I said. "Let them try. I'd love to see this place's practices exposed in the courtroom." The group agreed unanimously. We spent the next week compiling everything into organized folders, one for each of us, containing our documented evidence and a detailed letter outlining our grievances and demands. 7 days later, 12 of us walked into Rachel's office together. Her secretary tried to stop us, but we swept past her. "Mrs. Morrison, you can't just," she started. "We have an appointment," I said firmly. "Rachel's about to make time for us." Rachel looked up from her computer, her expression shifting from surprise to barely concealed annoyance. "What is this?" "This is a delegation of residents who need to speak with you," I said, placing my folder on her desk. 11 other folders followed, making a substantial pile. "We're here to demand release from our contracts without financial penalty," Dorothy said. "Effective immediately." Rachel's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly composed herself. "That's a very serious request." "May I ask why?" "Because this facility has systematically failed to provide the services and quality of care promised to us," Betty said, pushing her folder forward. "It's all documented in here." For the next hour, we presented our case. We showed photographs. We played recordings we'd made of staff members being dismissive or rude. We cited specific instances of neglect, broken promises, and safety failures. We presented a detailed analysis showing how the quality of food, activities, and maintenance had declined significantly after the first 3 months. "You lured us here with false promises," Harold said bluntly. You put on a good show for the first few months until we were locked in with our deposits and contracts. Then the mask came off. Rachel's face had grown increasingly pale as we spoke. These are very serious allegations, she finally said, her practiced composure cracking slightly. They're not allegations, I corrected. They're documented facts. We have evidence of everything we've said. And we're prepared to share this evidence with the state regulatory board, the media, and anyone else who will listen unless you agree to our demands. The room fell silent. Rachel stared at the pile of folders on her desk, clearly calculating her options. I'll need to speak with corporate, she said finally. And with our legal team. You have 1 week, Dorothy said firmly. After that, we start making phone calls. We left her office as a united front, and it felt powerful. We'd been made to feel weak, helpless, dismissed. But together, we had strength. Over the next few days, we noticed a subtle shift in how staff treated us. Word had clearly gotten around about our meeting with Rachel, and suddenly people were being more careful, more professional. It was too little, too late, but it confirmed what we'd suspected. They were capable of providing good service when they felt they had to. 6 days after our meeting, Rachel called us back to her office. We entered as a group again, prepared for a fight. I've spoken with corporate and our legal team, Rachel said, her tone notably different from our last meeting, more conciliatory, less dismissive. Given the concerns you've raised, we're prepared to offer you release from your contracts without penalty. Your deposits will be fully refunded. I felt Dorothy grab my hand and squeeze. We'd actually done it. We'd stood up for ourselves and won. There are conditions, Rachel continued. You'll need to vacate within 3 weeks. And we're asking that you sign non-disclosure agreements. Absolutely not, I said immediately. We won't sign anything that prevents us from sharing our honest experiences. More negotiation followed. Finally, we reached a compromise. We could leave within 3 weeks with full refunds, and we wouldn't be required to sign NDAs. In exchange, we agreed not to organize formal campaigns against the facility, though we remained free to share our personal experiences if asked. It wasn't perfect, but it was acceptable. Walking out of that office for what I hoped would be the last time, I felt 20 years younger. Dorothy grabbed my hand and held it tight. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. We did, I agreed, tears of relief streaming down my face. That evening, I called Michael and told him everything: the declining service, missing Emma's birthday party, our documentation and demands, and finally, our victory. Mom, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice thick with guilt. I should have been paying closer attention. I should have noticed what was happening. It's not your fault, sweetheart, I assured him. They were very good at hiding it, especially from families. But I need your help now. I need to find a new place to live. Mom, would you consider moving closer to us? There's a small independent living complex near our neighborhood. Much less fancy than Sunset Meadows, but I've heard really good things. Real good things, not marketing lies. And you'd be 10 minutes away. For the first time in months, I felt genuine hope. Tell me more. Over the next week, Michael helped me tour several options. We found a modest independent living apartment complex called Riverside Gardens. It was nothing fancy, no crystal chandeliers or fancy dining rooms, but the director was straightforward about what they could and couldn't offer. The residents we met seemed genuinely content, and the online reviews were consistently positive with specific, believable details. Best of all, it was close to my family. 10 minutes from Michael, 15 from Susan, 20 from David. Dorothy and I made another decision: we'd rent a small duplex together instead of going into another facility. We'd split costs, have companionship, and maintain complete independence and control over our lives. I never want to feel that trapped again, Dorothy said as we toured the duplex that would become our home. Me neither, I agreed. From now on, we make our own rules. Moving day from Sunset Meadows was bittersweet. I felt no sadness about leaving that place, only relief. But I felt for the residents who were staying, those who couldn't afford to leave, who had nowhere else to go, who would continue to receive declining care and broken promises. As Dorothy and I loaded the last boxes into the moving truck, George came down to say goodbye. He was staying. His family situation made it difficult to leave. "You two are brave," he said, giving us each a hug. "I wish I had your courage." "It's never too late to stand up for yourself, George," I told him. "Remember that." As we drove away from Sunset Meadows for the last time, I looked back at the building that had promised so much and delivered so little. But I didn't feel defeated. I felt empowered. I'd learned something crucial: being old doesn't mean being powerless. We still have voices, rights, and the ability to demand respect. Now it was time to start over. And this time, it would be on our terms. The duplex Dorothy and I rented was in a quiet neighborhood filled with families, young professionals, and a few other seniors. It was nothing like Sunset Meadows. No grand lobby, no scheduled activities, no dining room service. Just two modest apartments side by side, each with its own entrance, connected by a shared porch. And it was perfect. Moving in felt like coming home to myself. I could arrange my furniture exactly how I wanted. I could cook what I wanted, when I wanted. I could stay up late reading if I felt like it, or sleep until 9 without anyone knocking on my door to announce breakfast. The freedom was intoxicating. Dorothy felt the same way. "You know what I did this morning?" she told me on our third day there, her eyes sparkling. "I made pancakes at midnight just because I could, and nobody told me I couldn't." We laughed together on our shared porch, and it felt good. Genuine joy instead of the forced cheerfulness that had characterized those last months at Sunset Meadows. Our first week in the new place, we established our own routines. Every morning, we'd make coffee and sit together on the porch, watching the neighborhood wake up. Kids would walk to the school bus stop. Our neighbor, a young mother named Jennifer, would wave as she left for work. The elderly man across the street, Mr. Patterson, would come out to get his newspaper and chat with us about the weather. We were part of the real community now, not a manufactured one designed to extract money from vulnerable seniors. Michael came by that first Saturday to check on us. He brought Susan and David with him, along with all the grandchildren. They brought groceries, helped us arrange some heavy furniture, and generally made sure we were settling in okay. "Mom, this place is really nice," Susan said, looking around my small but cozy apartment. "It feels like you." She was right. It did feel like me, like the person I'd been before loss and loneliness had worn me down. "Grandma, can we come visit whenever we want now?" Emma asked, bouncing on my couch in that way 7-year-olds do. "Anytime at all, sweetheart," I told her, pulling her into a hug. "No visiting hours, no permission needed. This is my home, and you're always welcome." 2 weeks after we moved in, I hosted Sunday dinner for the entire family. My small dining room was crowded with my 3 children, their spouses, and all 7 grandchildren. We could barely fit around the table, and it was loud and chaotic and absolutely wonderful. "Grandma, your spaghetti is the best," Tommy declared, sauce all over his face. "Better than that fancy place?" I teased. "Way better," he confirmed seriously. After dinner, while the kids played and the adults cleaned up, Michael approached me at the sink. "Mom, I need to apologize," he said quietly. "I pushed you into Sunset Meadows without really understanding what you needed. I thought I was helping, but I was really just making it easier for myself not to worry about you." I dried my hands and turned to face my son. "Michael, you were trying to do the right thing." "We all were. But you know what I learned from all this?" Sometimes what looks good on paper, the fancy facilities, the structured activities, the professional care, isn't what actually makes life worth living. What does make life worth living? He asked. I gestured at the chaos around us, grandchildren laughing, Susan and Dorothy chatting like old friends, David showing his wife something on his phone while she rolled her eyes affectionately. This freedom, family, the ability to make my own choices and live my own life. That's what matters. Susan joined us, slipping her arm around my waist. We're going to do better, Mom. We're going to visit more, call more, be more present. We got complacent when you were at Sunset Meadows because we thought you were taken care of. But you don't need to be taken care of. You need to be part of our lives. And you need to be part of yours, Dorothy added, coming over with a dish towel. No offense to your lovely children, Patricia, but you can't live for them either. You have to live for yourself too. She was right. That was another thing I'd learned. I'd spent so long defining myself as a wife, a mother, a grandmother, that I'd forgotten to be Patricia. Just Patricia, a person with her own interests and desires and right to happiness. Over the following months, Dorothy and I built a life that was truly ours. We joined a book club at the public library, a real one, with people of all ages, not just seniors. We volunteered at the local food bank every Tuesday morning. We took a pottery class at the community center. Dorothy discovered a love for watercolor painting and took lessons from a local artist. I joined a gardening club and helped maintain the community garden 2 blocks away. We made friends, real friends based on shared interests rather than shared circumstances. Jennifer, our young neighbor, became a regular visitor. Her kids loved Grandma Patricia and Grandma Dorothy, and we loved them right back. We babysat occasionally, attended school plays, gave advice when asked. Mr. Patterson across the street turned out to be a retired history professor with fascinating stories about everything from World War II to the Civil Rights Movement. We'd spend hours on his porch listening to him talk. We weren't isolated in an age-segregated facility anymore. We were part of the rich, messy, beautiful diversity of real life. About 4 months after leaving Sunset Meadows, Dorothy and I were approached by a reporter from the local newspaper. She'd heard about what happened at Sunset Meadows and wanted to know if we'd be willing to share our story. Dorothy and I looked at each other. We'd promised not to organize campaigns against the facility, but we'd never agreed to stay silent about our experiences. Yes, I said firmly. We'll talk. The article that ran 2 weeks later was titled "The Truth Behind Luxury Senior Living: 2 Women's Story of Broken Promises." It featured our experiences alongside accounts from 3 other former Sunset Meadows residents who'd reached out to the reporter independently. The response was overwhelming. The state began an investigation into the facility's practices. Other seniors contacted us to share similar experiences at different facilities. We were invited to speak at senior advocacy groups, community centers, even at a state legislative hearing on assisted living regulations. I never thought I'd become an activist at 76, Dorothy joked as we prepared for one of our speaking engagements. Life is full of surprises, I replied with a smile. During these talks, I always emphasize the same key points. Getting older doesn't mean giving up your rights or your dignity. You're not a burden. You're not someone to be warehoused and forgotten. You deserve respect, proper care, and the freedom to make your own choices about how you want to live. I also addressed families. Please don't just drop your parents or grandparents somewhere and assume they're fine because it looks nice or costs a lot. Visit regularly. Actually visit. Don't just call. Ask real questions and listen to the answers. Pay attention to changes in mood, health, or the facility itself. Your parents advocated for you your whole childhood. Now it's your turn to advocate for them. After one particularly moving talk, A woman in her 50s approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "My mother has been at a place like Sunset Meadows, and she's been complaining about the care, but I kept thinking she was just being difficult. After hearing your story, I realize I haven't been listening. I'm going to visit her this weekend and really pay attention." "That's all any of us want," I told her, giving her hand a squeeze. "To be heard and respected." Dorothy and I also started a small support group for seniors navigating housing decisions. We met twice a month at the community center, and it grew to include about 20 regular members. We shared experiences, researched options together, and helped each other ask the right questions when touring facilities. "What you two are doing is so important," said one member, a man named Robert whose wife had recently passed away. "I almost made the same mistake you did, Patricia. I almost chose a fancy place based on a slick sales pitch. Thanks to your advice, I asked hard questions, checked references, and found a place that's honest about what they can and can't provide. Now, a year after leaving Sunset Meadows, my life looks completely different and so much better. I wake up every morning in my own home, on my own schedule. Dorothy and I have our coffee together on the porch, sharing our plans for the day. Maybe I'll work in the community garden, or maybe I'll babysit for Jen. Maybe Dorothy and I will drive to the museum, or maybe we'll just spend the day reading on the porch. The point is, it's my choice. My family visits regularly, real visits, not obligatory check-ins. Last Sunday, Susan brought Emma over, and we spent the afternoon baking cookies together. Emma told me about school, her friends, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. We talked like two people, not like a grandmother being visited out of duty. "Grandma, you seem so much happier now than you did at that other place," Emma said as we waited for the cookies to bake. "I am, sweetheart. Much happier." "Why?" I thought about how to explain it in terms a 7-year-old could understand. "Because now I get to choose how I spend my time and who I spend it with. Freedom makes people happy." She considered this seriously. "I think you're right." Last week, we got news that George, our friend who'd stayed at Sunset Meadows, was moving out. The state investigation had found multiple violations, and the facility was being required to make significant changes or face losing their license. George called to tell us he'd found a small apartment not far from ours. "You two inspired me," he said. "I realized I didn't have to accept being treated that way. I'm 78 years old, but I'm not dead yet." "Damn right you're not," Dorothy told him. "Come over for dinner once you're settled." Patricia makes a mean pot roast. This evening, as I sit on my porch watching the sunset, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude, not for what I have, but for what I escaped and what I learned. I learned that fancy appearances mean nothing if there's no substance beneath. I learned that my voice still matters, that I still have power, that age doesn't equal powerlessness. I learned that real community can't be manufactured or scheduled. It grows organically when people genuinely care about each other. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Never too late to start over. Never too late to choose happiness and dignity over convenience and empty promises. Dorothy comes out of her apartment with 2 cups of tea. She hands me one and settles into the chair next to mine. "What are you thinking about?" she asks. "Just how far we've come," I reply. "A year ago, we were trapped in that place, feeling powerless and invisible. Now look at us, we're advocates, we're helping others, we're living life on our own terms." "Not bad for a couple of old ladies," Dorothy says with a grin. "We're not old ladies," I correct her. "We're experienced women who know our worth and refuse to settle for less than we deserve." Dorothy raises her teacup. "I'll drink to that." We sit in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood settle into evening. A dog barks somewhere nearby. Children's laughter carries from a few houses down. The street lights flicker on one by one. This ordinary, beautiful, free life is worth more than all the luxury amenities and empty promises in the world. To anyone listening who might be facing similar decisions, whether for yourself or for someone you love, please remember this: don't be fooled by beautiful lobbies and glossy brochures. Ask hard questions. Check references. Visit unannounced after the person has moved in. Listen when they express concerns instead of dismissing them. And if you're a senior feeling trapped or mistreated somewhere, know this: you still have power. You still have rights. You still have a voice. It's never too late to advocate for yourself. Your golden years should truly be golden. Don't settle for anything less. You've earned the right to live with dignity, freedom, and respect. Don't let anyone, no matter how professional they seem or how fancy their facility looks, take that away from you. Stand up, speak up, and if necessary, walk away. Your life, your happiness, and your dignity are worth fighting for. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there make better choices or gives them the courage to change course if they need to. Remember, we're never too old to start over. We're never too old to demand better. And we're never too old to choose happiness.